Hello everybody, James here. Now, this quote came out yesterday and was kind of a knee slapper of a couple of lines to say for a number of different reasons. But Mark Shapiro is one of TKO's head honchos, basically second in command of both WWE and UFC as TKO's president. He's one under TKO CEO Ari Emanuel. Anyway, Mark Shapiro, here we go, had an interview with something called Off the Record with Andrew Marchand, presented by WSC Sports. Don't ask me what's going on here exactly. I mean, they look like they're conducting an interview in the middle of a basketball court with a wall and a TV up there, or maybe a kitchen showroom, whatever they've done. But the point is, it looks more like a convention kind of thing, and supposedly there was a live audience watching this as well. But the quote itself, unfortunately, isn't in this video because this is like a free preview, and I'm not going to subscribe to it, so we're going to have to go to the transcription from Fightful. Here's what he said. And yet, they're open to new ideas. They're talking about generally WWE types. Anyway, they never seem exhausted. They're ready to take on a new shot, a new risk, a new opportunity. Hey, Nick, let's talk about launching a new event. Right now, a lot of our PLEs were created by Vince McMahon. We need to get in the business of taking that torch and moving past that. And Nick Khan and Triple H created WrestlePalooza, which is the launch event for our new ESPN deal, which did incredibly well and may turn into a super franchise. Not to mention, from a merch standpoint, I don't need to tell you, securing the IP rights and then selling merch at WrestlePalooza, let's just say it was a real winner. Okay, there is a number of things we need to pull apart from that little paragraph there. Two main points, really. WrestlePalooza is not a new IP. It's not new intellectual property. It came from ECW. WWE has owned WrestlePalooza, the name, I guess, since the bankruptcy court hearing that sort of settled in like 2003. But so the point is that it's not a new IP. WrestlePalooza and Triple H and Nick Khan didn't invent WrestlePalooza. They stole the name from a pay-per-view that Paul Heyman launched in what, like 1998, maybe 1997? Let's check. Yes, I was kind of right with the pay-per-view. It was, I believe, ECW's second pay-per-view, but there was actually WrestlePalooza in 1995. So yes, that apparently came from the brain of Paul Heyman, although it didn't, because the actual answer is WrestlePalooza was a joke wrestling event from Married with Children. Here we go. And there's Bud Bundy in a B outfit with actual King Kong Bundy, who would appear on Married with Children several times. And here's something even more interesting, is that three different ECW originals have told me personally that Paul Heyman's pay-per-view name, brainchild idea of WrestlePalooza, was just about the stupidest name they'd ever heard of at the time, and it was a joke in the industry at the time that they called a pay-per-view WrestlePalooza. Now, what's next, basically? Here's a new IP, intellectual property idea. How about Living Dangerously? November to remember, December to forget. Otherwise, December to dismember, I suppose. Now, we need to go back to the quote again. I'm just going to read it to you instead of showing it, really. But here we go. Nick Khan and Triple H created WrestlePalooza. That was part of the quotes. Obviously, they didn't. Now, which is a launch event for our new ESPN deal, which did incredibly well. That's the other quote. Now, that's not entirely true that it did incredibly well, kind of maybe with ticket sales, and they did a good job with hyping the show more than any other show they do apart from the major players, I guess. But I think at the time it was reported that the WrestlePalooza show had attracted about 100,000 new subscribers, where WrestlePalooza would actually need to bring in more like 850,000 subscribers a month to offset the cost of paying WWE that $1.6 billion over 5 years for the PLE rights. Now, Austin Karp on the Sports Media Journal revealed on the Sports Media Podcast via PW Insider that there was indeed a spike in new signups around WrestlePalooza, and that the early days of WWE's deal with ESPN are in a better place than others have claimed. It's just most likely not offsetting the cost even remotely at this point. So how do you gauge what a success is? Well, if it's a creative success, even ESPN's own website reviewed the show and gave it merely a passing grade of C. So rousing success, I'm not sure it qualifies as that. So I think that's just more CEO speak, that kind of thing, to turn that frown upside down. Anyway, back to the quote. WrestlePalooza may turn into a super franchise. Not to mention, from a merch standpoint, I don't need to tell you, securing the IP rights, and then they didn't secure the IP rights, they already had the IP rights. And then selling merch at WrestlePalooza, let's just say it was a real winner. Well, I don't remember too many people running around in WrestlePalooza shirts, because to be honest, it's kind of a butt-ugly logo. Even though it's still a funny name, I'm not sure that many people were running around with the logo on its t-shirt. And I think that's pretty much it. I think with all the metrics, pretty much, apart from maybe ticket sales, I would hardly say it was the runaway success that Mark Shapiro is claiming. But, okay, that's one part of the issue here, is that WWE or Triple H, Nick Khan, did not invent WrestlePalooza. We know this. But here's the other thing. Here's the quote. Right now, a lot of our PLEs were created by Vince McMahon. We need to get in the business of taking that torch and moving past that. Why? We all knew that deep down, and admit it yourself, even if you thought this was a great idea that Vince McMahon had disappeared from WWE forever, and that, he was only supposedly back in the company to facilitate the amalgamation with WWE and UFC or whatever bump he was talking about then, to basically spin the reason why he was strong-arming himself back into WWE in the first place. But anyway, I think if we all admitted it to ourselves, TKO taking over from Vince McMahon was always going to end up in tears. Now, we may not have wanted to believe it at the time, but I think we all knew. They had, that 100-day grace period, like presidents and prime ministers get, the first 100 days. You get that sort of sympathy from the fans and everything else, and, after a while, everything's reassessed. But anyway, that might have happened longer than 100 days, more like a year for TKO, maybe a bit longer. But anyway, I did say this at the very first WWE Raw on Netflix episode. I think most people were saying how wonderful it was. I sat back and thought, man, it really wasn't that great. In fact, it kind of just depressed me with the way that I could see WWE going in 2025. It was all the true corporate era. It was all about the self-congratulations and putting themselves over as the geniuses that saved WWE and pro wrestling, putting themselves in the WWE Hall of Fame, having the executives do all the voiceovers and appearing at the center of WrestleMania posters, all that kind of thing. But it's not about the wrestling anymore. It's not really about the television product anymore. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. It's just flatlined. The booking is okay. The programming is okay. It's just A to B everything. It's just, there's nothing remotely interesting happening at the moment. I don't know if you feel differently about that. I did a video yesterday talking about that, so I don't need to go any further on. But once again, it's all about the metrics, it's all about the profits, it's all about the record-breaking ticket sales, it's all about the stock value, and it's all about increasing the value of the company by any means necessary. And once again, to quote George Carlin, it's a big club, and you ain't in it. Very few people. It's actually a very small club, and you ain't in it. But anyway, whatever heart and soul that was left in WWE before Vince McMahon was finally ousted is well and truly ripped out and served on a platter to the highest bidder. We can mostly all agree on that. But anyway, Mark Shapiro now wants to, I guess, leave his own stamp on WWE with intellectual properties he thinks he's created, and apparently get away from some of the legacy names that Vince McMahon created, or at least were created with Vince McMahon owning the company over 40 years. Now, once again, here's the piece of the quote. Taking the torch and moving past that sounds scary to me. And it also sounds unnecessary and like unwelcome change driven by ego, because what's next to go? No Mercy? I mean, let's assume that something is going, by the way, because obviously, they want to put their own stamp. They want to get away from some of the things from the Vince McMahon era, and apparently that involves IP. So, No Mercy, Backlash, Crown Jewel. To be honest, Crown Jewel can go. I always hated that name. Money in the Bank. How about Elimination Chamber? How about Saturday Night's Main Event? That was a Vince McMahon thing. Or it was created under the watchful eye of Vince McMahon and Dick Ebersol. What about Raw or SmackDown or SummerSlam or the Royal Rumble or WrestleMania? Because the story goes that Howard Finkel created the name WrestleMania, but it all falls under Vince's ultimate vision for what pro wrestling and sports entertainment should be. Now, what I'm getting out of that Mark Shapiro quote is that he really wants to distance himself from that awful Vince McMahon for causing so many issues within the company in the last couple of years he was with WWE. Now, that's obviously why Mark Shapiro has then turned to that bastion of all that is good and pure and just in professional wrestling, Paul Heyman, to take inspiration from. But after Vince McMahon was ousted, Shapiro was one of the first to publicly denounce him in order to, wipe the slate clean. We're not responsible for crapping on women's heads or whatever else it is he was accused of. Now, allegedly. Now, that was a smart move, very much so, at the time. But ever since then, whenever Shapiro opens his mouth and these quotes get around all over the place, it makes me fear that WWE is going to become completely unrecognizable. I mean, are they genuinely going to get rid of some of the super recognizable IPs that we've grown to, if not love, at least accept over the years? But, I mean, what about this quote here that I've just got to show you once again, just in case you forgot it? TKO President Mark Shapiro states that Vince McMahon was primarily pricing tickets for families and wasn't focused on maximizing the opportunity to increase said prices like TKO is focused on. Once again, there is no heart and soul left. It is all bottom line. It's all bottom line, and it's all ego-driven. It's just, that's what it is. I mean, and here's something else. I'm going to go just find the other one. Here we go. It's from the sports that they've just called it. Like good pay-per-view names don't grow on trees. Look at WrestlePalooza. It's still a terrible name. But, I mean, look at some of these ones that WWE swung with and missed. I mean, for every Bad Blood, which is a great name for a show, there's been The Bash, for example. There's been Fatal 4-Way. There's been, I mean, the In Your House Fatal 4-Way or the Final Four, I think it was. I like that name, but I really love the In Your House names. Fatal 4-Way, Roadblock, This Tuesday in Texas, all-time stinkeroony, that name. Bragging Rights, WrestleMania Backlash, just for whatever reason, just re-promoting something that didn't need, rebranding something that didn't need rebranding. Another one, Tables, Ladders, Chairs and Stairs, exactly the same thing. Beware of Dog, I've not got that much of a problem with that one. Good Friends, Better Enemies, I don't know. They all had a name, I think. I'm not, even the first In Your House may have had an unofficial name, I can't remember, but I think they only started putting them on the posters of like 7. Anyway, Taboo Tuesday, Terrible Cyber Sunday was just as bad, and of course, how could we ever forget Great Balls of Fire? The point I'm making is that you can't just say, hey, well, all these wonderful names like No Mercy and Bad Blood and Backlash and everything that have been serving us really well for decades now, we need to get rid of just purely because somehow it was vaguely associated with Vince McMahon. It's hard enough, once again, it's hard enough to come up with a good name. Even if you own the IP, previously and have just taken it, from ECW. But I've no idea why Mark Shapiro feels it's so important to start getting away from the Vince McMahon era show names and ideas, especially if they worked, other than for ego's sake. Now, even Vince McMahon, for whatever reason, he started changing names or even whittling off numbers, if you remember this, from WrestleMania. Because I think the excuse at the time was given that, we don't want to tell people like how old WrestleMania is. And it's like, but that's the exact reason you do, because it's a legacy pay-per-view. And the point is that it seems that whoever, the lesson here is that whoever heads WWE, no matter how smart they are, seem to develop this weird brain rot and just try and monkey around with the formulas that have worked for decades. If it isn't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. And it's just all to placate their own conceitedness or belief that they need to leave their mark, even if it's a skid mark on the pro wrestling business. But anyway, Mark Shapiro wants to get further away from Vince McMahon concepts, regardless of whether he invented them or not, purely because they were invented or created in the 40 years that he owned WWE. So that's the quote. I wanted to highlight that. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to be back quite soon with another... No, I'm sorry. I'm going to post that first and record it second. Forget it. I'll see you for the next one.